The crimson sun of Zarian 7 cast long shadows across the barren wasteland as Marine Sergeant Jake Morrison adjusted his rifle scope. 3 days into their reconnaissance mission, his squad had encountered nothing but endless stretches of rust-colored sand and twisted metal debris from the war that had ravaged this planet decades ago. Movement. 2 clicks southeast, whispered Private Chun through the comm unit. Her voice barely audible above the howling wind that never seemed to stop on this forsaken world. Jake pressed himself lower against the rocky outcrop, scanning the horizon through his binoculars. The planet had been abandoned by its native species, the Zirathi, after a brutal civil war left it uninhabitable. At least that's what the intel reports claimed. But recent satellite imagery had detected heat signatures and strange energy readings. Prompting command to send Jake's team to investigate, the sound reached them first a low, guttural whining that seemed to echo from the canyon below. It wasn't human, that much was certain. The pitch rose and fell in a rhythm that spoke of pain and desperation. Jake had heard similar sounds before, during his childhood on the farming colonies where injured animals would cry out when caught in the automated fencing systems. "Sir, that doesn't sound like any Zirathi technology we've encountered," muttered Corporal Rodriguez, the team's tech specialist. His scanner was picking up biological signatures, but the readings were unlike anything in their database. Jake made the decision that would change everything. Against standard protocol for reconnaissance missions, he signaled for his team to investigate. They moved carefully down the rocky slope, weapons ready, following the source of the tortured sounds. The crying grew louder as they approached a cluster of metallic debris that had once been part of a Zirathi settlement. What they found defied all expectations. Trapped in a crude snare made from salvaged wire and metal fragments was a creature that resembled nothing so much as a massive Volf, but with characteristics that marked it as distinctly alien. Its fur was a deep violet color that shimmered with an almost metallic sheen, and its eyes, 6 of them, arranged in pairs down the sides of its elongated skull, glowed with an intelligence that was unmistakably sentient. The creature was enormous, easily the size of a small horse, with powerful limbs that had clearly been designed for both speed and strength. But now those magnificent limbs were tangled in the cruel wire trap, which had cut deep gashes into its flesh. Dark purple blood stained the sand around it, and the creature's breathing was labored and weak. "Jesus," breathed Private Chun, lowering her weapon slightly. "Look at the size of that thing." But Jake was looking at something else entirely. The snare hadn't been set by accident or as part of some automated system. The construction was deliberate, cruel even, designed not just to trap but to cause maximum suffering. Someone had wanted this creature to die slowly, the alien canine's eyes fixed on the approaching humans, and for a moment Jake expected it to snarl or attempt to attack despite its weakened state. Instead, the creature went completely still, those 6 luminous eyes studying the Marines with an intensity that was deeply unsettling. There was no fear in that gaze, only a profound sadness and what Jake could only describe as resignation. "Sir, we should call this in," Rodriguez said, his voice uncertain. "Command needs to know there are still life forms on this planet." Jake knelt at the edge of the snare's perimeter, studying the trapped creature. Up close, he could see the intelligence in those alien eyes, could almost feel the weight of the creature's gaze as it watched him. There was something profoundly wrong about leaving any sentient being to suffer like this, regardless of species. "Chun, Rodriguez, establish a perimeter. Keep watch for any other life signs," Jake ordered, making another decision that went against every rule in the book. "I'm going to try to get it out of there." "Sir, that's not exactly standard," Rodriguez began. "Nothing about this situation is standard, Corporal," Jake cut him off. "That thing is dying, and it's clearly intelligent. We're not leaving it to suffer." As Jake approached the snare, the creature's massive head tilted slightly, those 6 eyes tracking his every movement. There was no aggression in its posture, only a kind of weary curiosity. Jake pulled out his multi-tool, studying the complex tangle of wires and metal fragments that held the creature prisoner. "Easy there," he murmured. "More for his own benefit than the creature's. I'm going to get you out of this mess." The wire was industrial grade, probably salvaged from the ruins of the Zirithi settlement. Whoever had set this trap had known exactly what they were doing. Jake began carefully cutting through the cables, working slowly to avoid causing further injury to the massive alien dot as he worked. The creature remained perfectly still, as if it understood that the human was trying to help. Occasionally, those luminous eyes would shift to scan the horizon, and Jake got the distinct impression that the creature was watching for danger, not from him, but from whatever had set the trap in the first place. It took nearly an hour to free the creature from the snare. When the last wire fell away, the alien canine tried to stand but immediately collapsed. Its injuries too severe for it to support its own weight. Dark purple blood continued to seep from the wounds, and Jake could see that infection had already begun to set in around the deeper cuts. "Sir, we've got company," Chun's voice crackled through the comm. "Multiple heat signatures approaching from the north. They're moving fast." Jake looked up from the wounded creature to see a cloud of dust on the horizon. Whatever was coming their way was moving with purpose, and given the deliberate cruelty of the trap they'd just discovered, Jake had a feeling that the approaching forces weren't going to be friendly. The alien canine made a sound, then not the pained whining from before, but something that sounded almost like a warning growl. Those 6 eyes were fixed on the approaching dust cloud, and every muscle in the creature's massive body was tense with alarm. "Rodriguez, can you identify what's coming our way?" The tech specialist adjusted his scanner, frowning at the readings. "I'm getting multiple biologics, sir. Similar signatures to our friend here, but smaller. They're armed with some kind of energy weapons." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the alien wind. The creature trapped in the snare hadn't been caught by accident or by some automated system. It had been deliberately targeted, hunted, and left to die by its own kind. The realization struck him like a physical blow. This wasn't just an injured animal they'd stumbled across. This was a refugee, a survivor of some kind of conflict that the intelligence reports had completely missed. "Chun, Rodriguez, we're moving out now." Jake made a decision that would have gotten him court-martialed under normal circumstances. He knelt beside the wounded creature and looked directly into those alien eyes. "I don't know if you can understand me, but we're not leaving you here." The creature's response surprised him. It made a sound that was almost like a sigh, and then began the painful process of trying to stand again. This time, when it faltered, Jake was there to support its massive weight. "Sir, that thing weighs at least 300 pounds, Rodriguez protested. "We can't carry it and maintain tactical mobility." "We're not carrying it," Jake replied, helping the creature steady itself on 3 legs while keeping the 4th injured limb elevated. "It's coming with us under its own power." "Aren't you, big guy?" The alien canine turned those 6 luminous eyes toward Jake, and for a moment, he could have sworn he saw something like gratitude in that alien gaze. Then the creature took a tentative step forward, leaning heavily against Jake for support, but clearly determined to move as they began their retreat toward the extraction point. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was going to change everything, not just for his squad, but potentially for the entire relationship between humanity and the alien species they'd encountered among the stars behind them. The dust cloud grew larger, and the sound of pursuit echoed across the wasteland. The hunt was on, and Jake Morrison had just chosen a side in a conflict he didn't yet understand. The wounded creature beside him limped forward with grim determination, its alien eyes scanning the terrain ahead with the focused intensity of a survivor who had learned that trust was a luxury that could cost you everything. But for the first time since being trapped in that cruel snare, it was no longer alone. The pursuit lasted through the night and into the next day. Jake's squad moved through the twisted landscape of Zarian 7 with their unlikely companion, who had proven far more resilient than his injuries suggested. The alien canine Jake had started thinking of him as Ghost, because of the way those 6 luminous eyes seemed to glow in the darkness had developed an uncanny ability to predict the movements of their pursuers. When the hunting party drew too close, Ghost would freeze, his massive head tilting as if listening to something the humans couldn't hear. Then he would nudge Jake toward a different path, leading them through hidden ravines and around concealed positions that their scanners had completely missed. It was becoming clear that this creature knew the terrain far better than any satellite mapping could reveal. "Sir, I'm picking up at least 20 hostiles on our tail," Rodriguez whispered into his cum as they crouched behind the ruins of what had once been a Zirathi transport vehicle. "They're organized, moving in coordinated search patterns. This isn't just some hunting party, these guys are military." Jake studied their surroundings through his scope. The pursuing forces had split into 3 groups, attempting to box them in against a massive cliff face that rose like a wall from the desert floor. It was a textbook flanking maneuver, and it was working. His squad was trapped with nowhere to go but up a sheer rock face that would be impossible to climb while supporting an injured creature. The size of Ghost, that's when Ghost did something that changed Jake's entire understanding of the alien species they were dealing with. The massive creature moved to a seemingly random section of the cliff face and began making a series of low, complex sounds, not the pained whining from before, but something that resembled a language. The sounds were accompanied by a strange shimmer in the air around Ghost's head, as if heat waves were rising from his fur despite the cold desert wind. Sean raised her weapon instinctively, but Jake held up a hand to stop her. He was watching Ghost's eyes, all 6 of them, as they began to glow brighter than before. The shimmer in the air intensified, and suddenly Jake realized what he was seeing. Ghost wasn't just making sounds, he was communicating with something. A section of the cliff face that had appeared completely solid began to shift and change, rock flowing like liquid to reveal a hidden passage that was tall enough for Ghost and wide enough for the squad to move through in single file. The technology was beyond anything Jake had ever seen, seamlessly integrated into the natural rock face and completely invisible to their scanners. "What the hell?" Chun breathed, staring at the opening that hadn't existed moments before. Ghost looked back at the humans, those alien eyes conveying a clear message: "Follow me if you want to live." Without hesitation, Jake made the call. "Move, move, move!" They disappeared into the hidden passage just as energy weapon fire began impacting the cliff face behind them. The tunnel was clearly artificial, carved from the living rock with precision that spoke of advanced technology, but it was old ancient even. The walls were covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and flow in the light from their tactical illuminators. Ghost led them through a maze of passages that branched and twisted through the heart of the mountain. At several junctions, he would pause and make those strange harmonic sounds again, causing new passages to open while others sealed shut behind them. It was clear that the entire mountain was some kind of massive technological construct, hidden beneath a facade of natural rock. "Sir," Rodriguez said, his voice filled with awe as his scanners went crazy trying to process what they were encountering. "This whole mountain is artificial. I'm reading power sources that are off the charts, but the energy signatures don't match any known technology." Jake was beginning to understand. The Zirathi hadn't been the original inhabitants of this planet, they had been conquerors, just like the intelligence reports had suggested. But the reports had been wrong about one crucial detail. The original inhabitants hadn't been wiped out or driven off. They had gone underground, literally, hiding in technological marvels that the Zirathi had never even suspected existed. Ghost was leading them through what amounted to an alien city carved from the living rock of the mountain. As they moved deeper into the complex, Jake began to see evidence of habitation chambers filled with technology that hummed with quiet power. Living areas designed for creatures of Ghost's size and physique, and most surprisingly, what appeared to be medical facilities. It was in one of these medical chambers that Ghost finally stopped, collapsing onto a platform that immediately began to scan his injuries with beams of soft, colored light. Jake watched in amazement as robotic arms emerged from the walls, tending to Ghost's wounds with precision and care that rivaled anything human medicine had to offer. "He brought us here to get medical attention," Jake realized. He knew exactly where he was going the whole time. As if responding to Jake's words, Ghost turned those 6 luminous eyes toward the human and made a series of sounds that were clearly directed at him. The tones were different from the harmonic communications that had opened the passages. These sounded more like an attempt at actual conversation. Chun stepped closer, her xenolinguistics training kicking in. "Sir, I think he's trying to talk to us. The tonal patterns suggest a complex language structure, but there's something else. Some of those sounds are almost familiar." She was right. Buried within the alien harmonic patterns were sounds that seemed almost human, not words exactly, but inflections and rhythms that suggested. Ghost had been listening to human speech and trying to understand it. Jake approached the medical platform slowly, making sure his movements were non-threatening. Ghost watched him approach, those alien eyes bright with what Jake was beginning to recognize as curiosity rather than wariness. "Thank you," Jake said simply, placing his hand briefly on one of Ghost's massive paws. "You saved us out there?" Ghost's response surprised everyone. The alien creature made a sound that was unmistakably an attempt to mimic human speech, rough and alien, but clearly an effort to communicate. It took Jake a moment to realize what Ghost was trying to say. "Tank ... you?" The words were barely recognizable, filtered through an alien vocal structure that wasn't designed for human language, but the intent was unmistakable. Ghost had been listening to their conversations, learning their words, and now he was trying to communicate in their language. Chun's eyes were wide with excitement. "Sir, this is incredible. He's demonstrating adaptive language acquisition at a rate that suggests an intelligence level that might exceed human norms. And the fact that he chose to mimic our language rather than trying to teach us his suggests a level of social awareness that..." Her explanation was cut short by the sound of energy weapons fire echoing through the passages behind them. Their pursuers had found the entrance to the underground complex, and were making their way through the tunnels. Ghost's head snapped up, all 6 eyes blazing with sudden alertness. He made a series of urgent harmonic sounds, and Jake watched as defensive systems throughout the medical chamber came online. Energy barriers shimmered to life across the entrances, and the soft lighting shifted to the harsh red of an alert status, but the most surprising development was what happened next. Ghost struggled to his feet despite the medical systems, still working on his injuries, and moved to a wall panel that responded to his touch. Jake watched in amazement as holographic displays filled the air around them, showing a 3-dimensional map of the underground complex. The displays clearly showed the positions of the pursuing forces as they made their way through the tunnels. But they also revealed something else. There were other life signs scattered throughout the complex. Ghost people weren't extinct. They were hiding, and they had been hiding for a very long time. Ghost turned to look at Jake, and in those alien eyes, Jake saw a plea that transcended species barriers. Ghost wasn't just asking for help, he was asking Jake to choose sides in a conflict that was far more complex than anyone had realized. The sounds of pursuit were getting closer, and Jake knew that whatever decision he made in the next few minutes would determine not just the fate of his squad, but potentially the future relationship between humanity and an entire species that the galaxy believed was extinct. Ghost made one more attempt at human speech, the words clearer this time despite their alien pronunciation. "Help ... Jake looked at his squad, saw the same realization in their eyes that he felt in his heart. They weren't just Marines on a reconnaissance mission anymore. They had stumbled into something that could change the course of interstellar relations forever. And sometimes, Jake thought as he checked his weapon and prepared to make his stand, the right choice was also the obvious one. The battle for the underground city lasted 18 hours and changed the course of galactic history. Jake's decision to stand with Ghost and his people came naturally, but the consequences were beyond anything he could have imagined. As the Zerathi hunting parties breached the outer defenses of the hidden complex, Jake's squad found themselves fighting alongside an alien resistance movement that had been waging a guerrilla war for over 3 decades. Ghost, despite his injuries, had insisted on joining the defense. The medical systems had worked miracles on his wounds, and while he still favored his injured leg, he moved through the tunnels with deadly grace. But more importantly, he had become the bridge between human and alien tactics, translating Jake's military experience into strategies that his people could understand and implement. The humans call it overlapping fields of fire. Ghost explained to his pack leader in their harmonic language. The translation device Jake had cobbled together from Rodriguez's equipment, struggling to keep up with the rapid conversation. Ghost's ability to learn human language had proven to be just the beginning of his adaptive capabilities. Jake watched through the tactical displays as Ghost's people implemented human military doctrine with an efficiency that would have impressed his old drill instructors. The aliens who called themselves the Vorthok had been fighting a defensive war for so long that they had forgotten how to take the offensive. Human military strategy, adapted to their superior technology and intimate knowledge of the terrain, proved to be a devastating combination. "Sir, this is insane," Rodriguez whispered as he watched alien warriors using human infantry tactics to outflank Zirathi positions that had been considered impregnable. "We're turning the tide of a war that's been going on longer than we've had spaceflight." The Zirathi had superior numbers and heavy weapons, but they had never faced an enemy that combined Vorthak stealth technology with human tactical innovation. Ghost led a pack of his warriors through maintenance tunnels that Jake had identified as perfect for flanking maneuvers, while Chen coordinated artillery strikes, using the Vorthak's defensive systems in ways their designers had never intended. But it was Ghost himself who provided the most surprising revelation of the conflict. As the battle raged through the tunnels and chambers of the underground city, Jake noticed that Ghost's pack deferred to him with a respect that went beyond normal military hierarchy. When he asked Ghost about it during a brief lull in the fighting, the alien's response changed everything Jake thought he knew about their situation. "I am air," Ghost said in his carefully learned English, the words heavy with emotion that transcended species barriers. "My father King, leader of all Vorthak. Zirathi kill him, kill my brothers, leave me for dead and trap. Think bloodline ended?" Jake stared at the massive alien warrior, suddenly understanding the true scope of what they had stumbled into. Ghost wasn't just a refugee or a survivor, he was the rightful leader of his people, the heir to a throne that the Zirathi thought they had eliminated forever. "Your royalty?" Jake said, the words feeling inadequate even as he spoke them. Ghost's 6 eyes glowed with something that might have been amusement. "Your word. Royalty. Not right. I am chosen to lead, yes, but must prove worthy. Today, with human friends, today I prove worthy." The final assault came at dawn on the second day. The Zirathi, frustrated by their inability to break through the combined human Vorthak defenses, had called in orbital support. Energy beams from space began cutting through the mountain itself, threatening to collapse the entire underground city. That's when Ghost made a decision that exemplified everything Jake had come to admire about the alien species. Instead of retreating deeper into the mountain complex, Ghost called together every Vorthak warrior in the city and announced his intention to take the fight to the surface. "We hide too long," he declared, his words carrying the weight of authority that Jake now understood was his birthright. "Time to reclaim our world. Time to show Galaxy that Vorthak still live." Jake found himself promoted from sergeant to general in an alien army, his squad forming the core of an integrated command structure that merged human and Vorthak forces into something greater than the sum of its parts. Qian became the liaison between human technology and Vorthak engineering, while Rodriguez found himself in charge of electronic warfare systems that operated on principles human science was only beginning to understand. The surface battle was unlike anything in recorded military history. Vorthak warriors emerged from hidden entrances across the entire continent, their stealth technology rendering them invisible to Zirathi sensors until they were close enough for devastating close-quarters combat. Human tactical doctrine coordinated the assault. But it was Vorthak technology that made victory possible. Ghost led from the front, his massive form cutting through Zirathi lines with a combination of alien grace and human tactical awareness. Jake fought beside him, covering the alien princes. Advances while Ghost's natural abilities allowed him to strike at enemies that human sensors couldn't detect. The turning point came when Ghost challenged the Zirathi commander to single combat, an ancient tradition that the occupying forces couldn't refuse without losing face among their own troops. Jake watched from the command position as his alien friend faced off against a Zirathi warrior twice his size, armed with weapons that could cut through armor like paper. But Ghost had learned more than just human language and tactics during his time with Jake's squad. He had learned about human determination, about fighting for something bigger than yourself, about never giving up even when the odds were impossible. The duel lasted only minutes, but when it ended, Ghost stood victorious over his people's oppressor, his alien howl of triumph echoing across the battlefield. The Zirathi surrender came within hours. Faced with the resurrection of a species they thought they had exterminated and the impossible alliance between Vorthok and human forces, their military commanders chose discretion over annihilation. 3 months later, Jake stood in the newly constructed embassy building that had been erected on the ruins of the old Zirathi command center. He wore the dress uniform of a colonel. His promotion had been backdated to the moment he decided to help Ghost escape from that cruel snare, and beside him stood Ghost, who now bore the ceremonial markings of the Vorthok king. "Never thought I'd end up as an ambassador," Jake said, looking out over the city that was rapidly being rebuilt using a combination of human engineering and Vorthok technology. Ghost, whose English had improved dramatically over the past months, responded with something that might have been laughter. "Never thought I would have human friends. But humans teach important lesson." "What's that?" Ghost turned those 6 luminous eyes toward Jake, and in them, Jake saw the same gratitude he had glimpsed in that first moment when he decided to cut the alien free from his torment. "Sometimes, when you help one who is abandoned and alone, you discover you are not alone either. Humans and Vorthok, we are packed now, stronger together than apart." Jake nodded, thinking about how a simple act of compassion had led to the first true alliance between humanity and an alien species that could serve as a model for all future interstellar relations. The intelligence reports had been wrong about so many things, but they had been most wrong about the most important thing of all. Sometimes, the galaxy's greatest treasures weren't resources to be exploited or territories to be conquered. Sometimes they were friendships waiting to be discovered, alliances waiting to be forged, and bonds that transcended the barriers of species and star systems. Ghost moved to the window, his alien features silhouetted against the setting sun of Zarian 7. "My people have saying, Jake Morrison. The pack that hunts together survives together today. Human and Vorthok pack begins hunt for better future." Jake joined his friend at the window, watching as the first joint patrol of human marines and Vorthok warriors made their way through the streets of the rebuilt city. In the distance, construction crews from both species worked side by side on projects that would benefit everyone. "Hell of a thing," Jake murmured. "How it all started with you caught in a trap?" Ghost's response surprised him with its wisdom. "Perhaps trap was not end of story. Perhaps trap was beginning. Sometimes, to find your pack, you must first be lost and alone. Then, when help comes, you know its true value." As the twin moons of Zarian 7 rose over the horizon, Jake reflected on the chain of events that had brought them to this moment. A simple decision to show compassion to an injured creature had led to the liberation of an entire species and the formation of an alliance that would reshape galactic politics for generations to come. But more than that, it had proven something that Jake's grandmother had always told him, but that he had never truly understood until now. The measure of a person or a species wasn't determined by their strength or their technology or their military might. It was determined by what they chose to do when they encountered someone who needed help. Ghost had been abandoned, injured, left to die by his own kind who had been twisted by years of occupation and oppression. But humans had chosen differently. They had chosen compassion over protocol, mercy over military doctrine, and hope over fear. And in making that choice, they had discovered something that would echo through the stars for centuries to come, Sometimes the greatest victories aren't won on battlefields, but in the simple moments when one being chooses to help another, regardless of the differences between them. The howl that rose from the city that night was not the cry of a creature in pain, but the song of two species celebrating their newfound kinship under alien stars.